Hi, I'm Doug Ross, editorial page editor at the Times. Here with me today are two Democratic candidates for Porter County Sheriff. We have Dave Reynolds and Harold Lush. Also in the room with us are two of our editorial board members, Debbie Ansom, who is general manager for Porter County, and Robert Blaskowitz, who is assistant managing editor. Let's begin with talking about your qualifications for the office. Harold.
My qualifications don't compare to Dave's because he was a sheriff for 8 years. I was employed in plant security at Bethlehem Steel from 1973 to 1988. Then I transferred to a computer department. But it was akin to a small community in terms of law enforcement matters. And I was a candidate for Porter County Sheriff in the primary of the year 2006. I think a fresh new approach without any ties to anyone, due to my refusal to accept donations, should serve the community well.
Okay, Dave?
Yes, I'd like to apologize. I have a serious cold here I'm fighting through, but I have a Bachelor of Arts in Forensic Studies and MPA from Indiana University. I've taught 9 separate courses, law enforcement courses at IU Northwest. I have 25 years in law enforcement experience from Lake Station and Portage. 2 decades of investigative experience. During that time, I was instrumental in arresting 2 serial murderers, Eugene Britt and Christopher Peterson. I fortunate to be selected as a Portage Police Chief, and after that I was elected twice, as the citizens of Porter County have elected me twice as the Porter County Sheriff. I think I have a proven track record of vision and leadership experience that I would like to bring back to the Sheriff's Department.
Well, we should probably talk about the Porter County Jail. As you know, we're opening the 3rd pod, so the question is, now what?
Is that me? Sure. Well, I think you need to go back to the history when I was actually involved in the building of the jail. It was funded when I went in there. The money was funded, allocated $33 million, and we redesigned the jail. When we walked in, they wanted a 3-tier jail like it was currently on Franklin Street. We changed that. We took out the elevators. We saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars in that, going into one level jail format, and also using indirect supervision with the pod system, which is, as of to this day, is working very effectively. If you go into that jail today, it looks like it just opened, and I think that's a tribute to our design and what we try to instill in all the employees. To answer your question, you need to understand, when I was sheriff, I asked for 21 jailers. They gave me none. So I wasn't going to move into the jail. We were going to move into a jail that was actually 3 times the size with no additional manpower. It couldn't be done. I then secured a federal grant. And through that federal grant, we were able to hire 11 jailers. I funded those 11 jailers for several years before the county then assumed that responsibility. But we were always short of manpower. And then at that time we couldn't open the 3rd pod because we didn't have the manpower. We are always asking for more manpower. Now finally, through studies from the Colorado Correction Institute and I think they used a couple other outside sources, they came up and they said, well, you need more men. Well, this is, in my opinion, not a revelation. Something that we were saying all along. I understand that the county has fiscally restraints, and I think the Sheriff's Department and myself have always worked with those restraints. But at some point in time, when they authorize the construction of the jail, they should have had the foresight to figure out how they're going to operate the jail, and they never did. And I'm pointing fingers. It's easy to criticize when you're on Monday, but those are the facts. And right now, what's going to happen is that, again, they have 5 jailers that are on disability. It happens, okay? They've hired the additional manpower that was approved by the council and the commissioners, and they still aren't to the point where they need it. And it's almost like you've got to look at the situations that arise, and you can't just go bare bones on everything. And they're still having problems. They allocated the needed funds to open up the third pod, which was a great thing, and I commend them for that. But they still are kind of toying with the operation of it. And I know the Sheriff Lane is doing everything, and his manpower, his current staff is doing everything to be prepared. But it's something that it's really not the sheriff's responsibility to fund that jail. They've never, and at some point in time, the question should not be directed to the sheriff. It should be directed to the proper governing body.
Okay, Harold?
Well, I disagree wholeheartedly with Mr. Reynolds. One of the main responsibilities of the sheriff is in Indiana Code 36-2-13, which states that the jail administration, is the sheriff's responsibility for maintaining and operating of the county jails. Now, the ACLU and another entity complained and said they were going to file a lawsuit if they didn't open the third pod. Since 2002, as Mr. Reynolds mentioned, that third pod has never been opened. I think the inmates are being treated inhumane. The Board of Commissioners and the County Council needs to avoid these potential lawsuits, which they're trying to do. We got a 5-year inspection coming up for this jail, and Mr. Lane is talking about opening it up, but he keeps delaying it. And this is 2014. We got to quit running out of excuses and get the thing done. Employees are banging on the doors looking for jobs. I don't see any problem with hiring somebody. Let's get the job done.
So the question is, where do you come up with the money for?
That's the Board of Commissioners and the County Council's responsibility, and they should come up with it. Since 2002, you're talking 12 years. That's a long time to not be opening up that third pod. And plus having employees that you should be having that you don't. So I have to say I'm sorry.
You know that what's happened with the criminal sentencing reform in the legislature. Why don't you address how that will affect Porter County? Harold?
Well, the judges seem to be more lenient, and they're letting prisoners, releasing prisoners earlier than they normally would do. I'm opposed to that in a way because to enforce zero crime in this community, we need our judges to be more strict with their sentencing and to abide by them. So many people just marijuana charges, they get out in a couple of days. They consider them nonviolent, but there's only a certain percentage that are nonviolent. So we got problems in this community that we need to correct.
Okay, Dave?
Well, in July, they're going to pass the reclassification of crimes, and I think they passed it with the understanding that it would help reduce the jail population. But I think if you read the whole statute and what's going to happen, I don't think that's going to happen. I think by eliminating mandatory minimums, you're going to actually increase the jail population. And I think that's another burden that the sheriff and the warden and his staff are going to have to deal with regarding policies and procedures. You can never build a jail big enough. I think what we tried to do with the monies that were allotted, that we build it with the fiscal restraints of the county in mind. And I think we did a tremendous job, and I'm very proud of what we did. With this new statute, it's a very good question. There's some debate, but the people that I've talked to, from the public defender's office, the prosecutor's office, and also in the jail, most attorneys think that it's going to increase the population. of the jail, and that's another problem. Is it the sheriff's fault? No. The legislators, I think, in good faith, passed the legislation that they thought was going to take care of this, help take care of the situation, and I just don't see how it's going to do that, because if you have to read all the fine print, and when you do away with the mandatory minimums, you've basically taken some of the responsibility and options away from the judicial system and the judges. You know, we're very fortunate in Porter County. I've always said this. We've got a good prosecutor staff. We've got a great court system. All the judges have always worked with the jail, and they've always tried to work with alternative treatment programs, GED, things that we did, IOP program, but they can't. But they have to follow the law, and the law I think it's going to restrict them in allowing them to do certain things.
So I guess the question is, how do you reduce the jail population given all of this? I mean, you've got community corrections, you've got, perhaps putting more people out on bail, bond, whatever. What do you do?
Well, in my opinion, certain people need to be in jail. You can't just put them out. You can't put them out. I mean, there are people. I think the community corrections programs are doing a good job. They're doing a great job. But still, you have to stay within the judges can only do so much. When I was a sheriff, every judge did everything they could. If there was a possibility of that person being released, their bond being reduced, or OR, they would do it. And I can't sit here and say it's the judge's fault, because it's not the judge's fault. It's just not Porter County. One thing you have to understand: it's just not Porter County. Go to any county throughout the country; they're suffering the same problems. With the advent of drugs and people committing crimes. When I was there, now I know I'm not getting off the subject here, but I think it needs to be addressed. If you go into our jail or any jail, 95, 96, 97% of the male population is in there for substance abuse. I mean, that's a dramatic statistics. And when I was there was oftentimes every female there was there for substance abuse violations. So what do you do? Those are good questions, but the sheriff, his responsibility is to maintain the operation of the jail and to secure the courts and to protect the citizens of Porter County. It's not the sheriff's responsibility to pass legislation, and it's not the sheriff's responsibility to determine who should be in his jail and who shouldn't be in the jail. That's the courts. And I said it's not an easy answer. And if anybody wants to capsulize it and make it easy, then they're doing a disservice to the whole system. I don't know, build bigger jails. Nobody wants that. But everybody wants to feel safe and secure in their homes. So they want the bad guys arrested. It's something that I think you can't just fall back and say, well, there's no answer. Because you need to work it out. You need to work with community corrections. You need to work with the judges. And the judges are the same judges that were there when I left. I mean, I know them personally. They do everything they can to better protect the citizens of Porter County. But again, they're restricted by what the law allows them to do.
Well, I agree drug and DUI activity is a problem for this county. Crime rose 24% last year. The judges and the sheriff, it's their responsibility to maintain that jail and take care of the situation, how many number of prisoners, especially these repeat offenders. We can't keep letting them out. It's just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't protect the citizens. These citizens are working all over, even working in Illinois, coming here and buying food and paying taxes on their homes, and they want to be protected. They want to have a place where they can live and raise their families. I'm disappointed. I'm very disappointed. That's why I'm a candidate.
Well,
Harold, how do you reduce recidivism and reduce those repeat offenders?
You have to lock them up longer. The judges are going to have to be stricter. It's not that we're going to, say, be gone with these prisoners. We got to care about the prisoners, but with corrections, like he was saying, the programs, we need some involvement. We need parental involvement at an early age, and community response, and the police force, and we can get this done.
I think what I'm very proud of the fact that when I became sheriff, there wasn't an intensive outpatient program there, IOP. They had one part-time person. When I left, we had 2 full-time staff. I was paying for that staff now. I'm not sure exactly who's funding it now, but our relationship with Porter Stark, and I think one of the reasons we've had minimal problems in the jail is because there's a waiting list to get into the IOP program, and when they get into the program, I took pride in the fact that I went to every graduation. I would go to the classes. Is it a panacea? No, but it's the right step. They've got to start somewhere. We've all addressed there's a heroin problem, there's a drug problem. You can't ignore it, and I think it's not the sheriff's responsibility. You can make the argument that it's not his responsibility, but myself and Sheriff Lane have taken the responsibility and the obligation to do something with that. And we believe, we've looked at, it's hard to deal with numbers. It's hard to correlate the actual recidivism. But with the limited data we've had, working with Valparaiso University when I was there, we showed that it was helping. And it's not even IOP. We brought in the caring place, and basically for women, and how to be mothers, how to be parents, because sometimes we're all very fortunate in how we grew up, but not everyone's had the opportunities to understand certain things. So we have their undivided attention in the jail. So we brought these classes in, and we've really seen a tremendous amount of difference from those programs. And I think, does it make a difference? I would say yes. And selfishly speaking, these programs also maintain the decorum of the whole jail. Those inmates know that we care about them. Okay, we're hard on crime. If you do something wrong, you should go to jail. No question about it. I think my career is demonstrated. I think my track record is fairly sufficient. That I've always been involved in thorough investigations, prompt arrest, and convictions of countless people. I mean, if you do something wrong, you should be held accountable. However, once you get in there as a sheriff, I think you have a responsibility to do whatever you can to reduce recidivism so they don't come back. And I'm telling you, I've had the opportunity in the last couple of months going door to door. I have seen people that have been in my jail that have thanked me just in the last week. Almost every community, because they know that we were trying to do something. But it's not easy. It's not easy. Those questions it's easier when you have somebody like on the state penitentiary, or you're dealing with long-term incarcerations. But when you have somebody in there maybe for a month, 2 months, well, then it's kind of hard to, and especially if they're not even from this area. But we've done that, and we have kept track. And I think you have to constantly. It's like being a sheriff in the jail. It's a lot of moving parts. You can't discard the responsibility that you have to those inmates. Because think about it, they're going to be out. They're going to be out, and they're going to be your neighbors. So why not take an opportunity, at least to try to give them and put them on the right path? And if you ever want to see something, go to the graduation at IOP, and you'll hear their stories, and you'll know what I'm saying is accurate.
We should talk about how Porter County should be addressing the substance abuse problems.
Well, that's kind of an easy one for me. My career as an investigator for 2 decades, I actually ran the drug unit for 3 times. I worked undercover for a couple years in Lake County and Porter County, filed a lot of cases in Porter County in federal court. But I believe that we need to take and I'm not pointing fingers, but we need to take a much more aggressive approach to identifying and apprehending those responsible for bringing drugs, dangerous drugs, specifically heroin into this county. You know, with the amount of our children dying of overdoses, and the crime that's occurring in this county that's directly related to drugs, to not address the serious problem is irresponsible. And I believe that we need to work closer with HIDA. We need to work closer with DEA in Maryville and also Chicago. Where is all the heroin coming from? I'll tell you, it's coming from Chicago. So why not open communications with DEA in Chicago? I mean, Porter County plates are going into Chicago to buying drugs and coming back here. Well, it seems to me that we should identify those people. And it's not that hard. It's just a little different tactic on how you do it. We have good people working in the drug units. We have good supervisors. But we need to be more aggressive. And if it needs to be that the sheriff's department has their own drug unit and they do that, I wouldn't be adverse to that. But right now, I'm not advocating that, but I am advocating a much more aggressive approach. I believe, as sheriff, I would work towards the passing of legislation that will identify the people that buy in pseudoephedrine. Right now, we do have legislation, but even in talking to the people that are in charge of HIDA, they said it's not effective. You make methamphetamine from pseudoephedrine. We should somehow, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure that if you stop and you can restrict the sale of and better document the sale of pseudoephedrine over the counter cold medicine. But how are these people making methamphetamines? Well, they're making methamphetamines because they have a system. They hit all the pharmacies and they buy it. We need to bet stricter. We need to pass legislation that has stricter curtails. We need to kind of control the sale of pseudoephedrine in the pharmacies.
Harold?
The majority of incarcerated individuals are due to illicit drugs and alcohol use. Accidental overdose and drug-related deaths rose by 78% last year in this county. There were 26 drug-related deaths. 8 involved prescription medications combined with other drugs. 1 died while ingesting a synthetic drug. Another succumbed to cardiovascular collapse. In relation to methamphetamine usage, it's a silent epidemic that will continue to escalate without solid parenting, public and police observance. I would implement drug testing with the parents' permission, police intelligence, co-op with the Drug Enforcement Agency and local drug task force units to reduce this reality. Intensify drug abuse resistance education program, grades K through 12. Every overdose death is preventable, provided we are vigilant. We need to raise the awareness of the usage of illegal drugs, marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, morphine, heroin, LSD. I also want to request that judges deal severely with the offenders. You can go to Empower, EMPOWERPC.org for more information. And I disagree with Mr. Reynolds on passing more legislation, which would be helpful, but we have to deal with what we have right now on the books.
Just a quick clarification. How would the drug testing program work with the permission of parents?
Some of it's already in effect where the parents have their own, they can go to their pharmacy and get drug testing kits. We need to keep a special eye on our children. It's the reality of today.
Okay, we haven't talked about how to deploy the police that you have on patrols and Detective Bureau and so forth. So, what are your thoughts? Harold?
Well, I'm sure Mr. Reynolds is more attuned to that because of his 8 years of experience. I'm going to do a lot of on-the-job learning if the citizens elect me. But I've always been in favor of unmarked cars, more unmarked cars. And there are some unmarked cars that you can tell are police cars. And it's kind of sad. I want the people not to be feel that they're intimidated by us when we drive by. I want them to feel protected.
Okay, Dave?
Well, I think we really touched on something I think is really important as far as one of the threats that Porter County faces, and that is obviously is crime. But how do you deal with crime? You deal with patrol. The backbone of any police department is patrol. And saying that, coming from a guy that spent most of his life as an investigator, I understand that it wasn't the investigations that were the backbone, the investigators. It was the patrolmen. The patrolmen are, you need, in order to have a effective police department, you need the right police officers, and you need the right amount of police officers. Now, one thing that I really haven't heard that much about, but I think it needs to be addressed, is the amount, but I've seen it since I've been walking South County quite a bit, is the amount of new subdivisions that are being built in South 30. Now, these governing bodies are approving the construction of these beautiful subdivisions, I might add, around Couts and Hebron, all through South 30, and there's several in the unincorporated areas north of 32. But we have not increased the manpower, it's going to be tough. But I think we need to examine the allocation of patrol and investigators' resources, and I think it's the responsibility of the sheriff to address this with the new sitting council, if there will be a new sitting council. Everybody, I've been hearing this when I was the police chief in Portage. We don't have any money. All through my 8 years as sheriff, we don't have any money. And I understand that. But everybody, but law enforcement, to run an efficient police department, it takes money. And I think at some point in time, people need to understand that. And I think the average citizen knows that. They want to be safe. Every person, whether you're at work, you're at school, you're at home, you have a right to feel and be safe. Well, sometimes, unfortunately, that comes with a price tag. Now, what I've seen in the South County, we've got there's the amount of people that have increased in Porter County in the last 20 years is like something, or in the area of 40,000 people. That's the size of a second-class city. Now, do you think we've increased the patrol? And I'm talking about unincorporated. I mean, it's something that those are the facts that need to be addressed. And to ignore that, and I think, given that, I say that is my responsibility as a sheriff to fight to increase the manpower. I mean, you can take what we have and move it around, but you can only do with what you have. And I know what they're doing. They're doing the very best. They're doing the very best. But I'm telling you, they at some point in time, they need to address the fact that this county is growing. Porter County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state of Indiana. All you need to do is look at it. And with that comes a responsibility from not only the sheriff's department, but all governing bodies. When you approve these subdivisions being built, these beautiful subdivisions, people that have worked their lives to upgrade, and they move in, they want to feel safe and secure as people live in Portage, in Valparaiso, or Chesterton. They have the same right to feel that way. And I know it's frustrating for the sheriff's department right now to properly protect everybody in all of these new subdivisions.
Okay, go ahead. Any other questions?
I don't think so. Real quickly, because I know we're running out of time. Equipment. Is there equipment needs specifically, whether it's vehicles, whether it's protection, arms that the department needs?
Can I answer that first?
Yeah.
I think this is from a sheriff, my chief and my sheriff hat. You can always have more equipment, but I think it's the responsibility of the sheriff, and as I was chief, to try to procure outside revenue sources. Congressman Visklowski's always been very responsive when the SWAT team needed more equipment. We've used the the military and some of their expired equipment that we could use, and it's been very effective. But you know, bulletproof vests, there's a life expectancy on them. So every 3 or 4 years you have to buy bulletproof vests, and it costs money. But I think the average person, the average businessman, I started the drug program in the dog program in Portage, and I also expanded the dog program in the county. We did not use any outside county resources for that. I started a SWAT team in Portage. I started a SWAT team in Porter County. We did that without using any taxpayers' money. So it's not easy, but people are willing to donate, to help, because they know it's important. Can you imagine in 2014 not having a SWAT team in this county? I mean, it's unheard of. But you know, it wasn't that many years ago we didn't have any. But I think it's a constant need, and I think that's the responsibility of the sheriff. And I think from a taxpayer standpoint, you can't go back and keep asking the taxpayer for stuff. Now, I've said that. I'm not speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I think we need more police officers, but I think we have we can procure other outside resources, and we have to, either state, federal grants, or state initiatives. They're there. You just have to constantly look for them.
Harold?
I'd like to see a tweaking of the training program for officers, and I'm disappointed that so many officers are working second jobs because of their salaries. It's tough for the whole department. If we could address those two issues, we might make some improvements. And then the patrols, definitely need more patrols, more areas. It's like Mr. Reynolds said, this county's growing fast. We need to keep up with it. And the commissioners and the county council need to address those issues to help us.
Okay, we have time for one final question. Very quickly, what is it that sets you apart from your opponent? Harold?
Lack of experience. He's very experienced. I gotta give him credit for that. What sets me apart is that I don't have any ties to anyone, and I'm not accepting any donations. So if they want a transparent, honest sheriff that they can see in a department, then I would highly recommend and appreciate the citizens' votes.
I think I have the proven background of the education, the law enforcement background. The last 7 years, I've worked as an investigator for an international security company investigating domestic and international crime. And so I've had the opportunity to work with other police departments throughout the whole world. And I think that will help me solidify what I believe. But it hasn't changed my belief. I mean, I believe that I'm the most qualified. And but even though I had a good job the last 7 years, I believe that I have the vision, and which sets me apart from this candidate or any candidate, and a proven track record that I can work with different governing bodies, regardless of their party, to get the job done. And I think that's really important. And if I was a citizen, I would want somebody with not only the experience but the vision that I've demonstrated that I have had in.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Again, this is Doug Ross, editorial page editor at the Times, with Democratic Porter County Sheriff candidates Dave Reynolds, Harold Lush, also in the room, Robert Blaskowitz, Debbie Ansom from our editorial board. Thank you for viewing.